We found way more amazing legendaries in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, including the weapon from the Dragon Lord, which is a ranged melee weapon that also looks really cool. We got some great guns, a spell that will likely be nerfed, and way more to go over. Before Dennis tells you about that awesome Dragon Lord sword and other legendaries, I want to jump in with a fun spell I found, the Cube of Unrelenting, which, as the name suggests, spawns a gelatinous cube, which then bounces and applies sticky bombs to enemies or on the ground, and then after the explosion it creates a pool of poison. I'm not sure if it can drop in other elements, but yeah, this is great, especially when fighting multiple enemies, as they will all get hit, and you can of course also lure enemies inside the pool so they take the damage over time. I got it while farming the Zomboss, which you can of course do yourself by going back to the Shadowgrave region, then to this fast travel point, just run till you reach the vending machines and they can have the boss respawn. But we're working on a big legendary farm tactics video as well, which might be up if you watch this already, then I will link to it at the end of this one. Either way, you can make this spell and other spells even better with the Buffmeister spell, which, as you might know, is kinda broken. Remember the pipe bombs from Borderlands 3 around launch? Well, it kinda reminds me of that. With this spell though, you can basically buff any weapon damage, and again other spells as well if you rock the second action skill from the spell shot. And then you want to put the Buffmeister in the right hand, activate it, then use the cube, and you will just deal way more damage, but also every weapon you equip will suddenly be increased by the damage of that left hand spell. As you can see, I'm wrecking, and this is on normal and on a case level as well, and that's also mostly because of the green frost SMG you can get by returning to the tutorial level, run all the way back to the castle. Then the chest over here will always have it spawn. But it seems like they already changed it. First, the chest would always be closed when you redid this level, but now it can sometimes be open. What you then want to do is just some other activities, missions, kill some other bosses, and then return, and then it should be closed. At least that is the case for me. So yeah, the weapon is already great on its own, but with the Buffmeister, it increases every bullet, and this weapon shoots a ton of bullets with the spell from your left hand. There is another spell, by the way, that spawns marshmallows and is surprisingly good as well. So let's go over that. Also a rocket launcher that shoots cannonballs and is also really good. Of course, if you like the video so far, then leaving a like on it would really help us out. And subscribe if you haven't already, because we got way more Wonderlands videos coming your way. Now Dennis, your turn.
Thanks, Jordan. Now, I've gotten some nice drops from the Chaos Chamber, like this Fatebreaker legendary sword. And let's talk about the looks first, because as you can see, this weapon has the exact same visual as the Sword of Souls, which is of course an important part of the campaign story, and we also saw it a lot before launch, mostly in screenshots and artwork of the Dragon Lord. It didn't actually drop from this boss though, at least not for me, but from our poor friend Zomboss, who was waiting for me at the end of a Chaos Chamber run. And we will also give some tips for this activity in that farm video that Jordan mentioned earlier. Back to the sword though, as next to the cool looks, this Fatebreaker sword also has an amazing secondary effect as its legendary property. When you perform a melee attack with this weapon, you will shoot out 3 lightning projectiles, so your melee weapon is now also a ranged weapon. The damage on these projectiles isn't amazing though, the sword still deals more damage if you hit an enemy in melee, but every projectile that hits restores 100% of its damage to your ward. So even though the damage isn't that high, you do get the full amount back as ward, which is of course amazing on a melee weapon, as it means you can stay in melee range much longer without having to worry about your health. And even if melee isn't really a part of your build, it's still nice to use this weapon as a defensive backup to immediately restore some ward as soon as enemies get too close. But if you are rocking a melee build, however, Jordan, you found another weapon that works pretty well with that, right?
Yeah, that's right. I also got it from the Zomboss, but likely has another dedicated source. It's called the Ragnarok of the Assassin, which sends out this slice that then goes towards targets and can also pass through enemies to hit multiple ones. It will also apply stickies to the enemies it hits, which then explode after a small duration. Overall, the damage is decent, like here you see Chaos level 1 on the normal difficulty, and you can pretty easily take out enemies with just this weapon. The downside is that you will automatically do a charge if you're just close enough from the target, so you're sometimes forced to still be in the face of the enemies, while you might want to just stand far away. I also have the vampire stat on the weapon, giving me 10% max health and ward back on a hit. And yes, with the Buffmeister spell I showed you earlier, you can enhance this damage even more and be this ranged sword fighter, which is kinda cool. I also found the Wizard's Pipe of Unseen Depths, a ranged magic SMG with a Lord of the Rings reference right there. And it's also surprisingly good, not only because you get health back really fast, but also because it shoots an elemental orb based on the health bar of the enemy. So if it's red, you shoot a fire orb, if it's shield, you shoot a lightning orb, if it's armor, you shoot poison. And when fighting enemies with multiple bars, then when nuking one of the bars, the orb changes to the best element for the new bar. So it's really handy. I also got it with the damage to projected front-facing ward reflects bullets back to the attacker, which can be fun against regular gunner enemies to see them take damage instead of you. Overall though, the shield is not that great, so it's just a fun extra. Still nice to use, and I got this by the way from the Parasite boss in the Tangle Drift side region, which is at the end of that regular quest. Not sure if it's a dedicated drop though, but it was still pretty great.
Alright, now to go from cool to absolutely silly, did you know that there's a spell in the game that lets you shoot marshmallows? No, I'm not kidding, I found this Marshmellow of Ruin, which is a great name for a spell by the way, from a mimic during a Chaos Chamber run, and I was pretty surprised at just how much this spell actually does. Not in terms of damage though, it does really good damage, but considering the fact that I found it at level 30 and I'm now 38, it's fallen off a little bit. But thankfully, damage isn't the only purpose of this spell. Let's start with the basics though. Casting the spell lets you shoot a giant sticky marshmallow. If you hit an enemy, it sticks to them, dealing fire damage on impact, and after a short delay, it will explode. But while the marshmallow is sticking down to explode, you can shoot it to make it deal extra damage. I was able to increase my damage on this skeleton from the base 393 to 3052 by shooting it with an assault rifle, so that's a massive increase. The explosion also deals fire damage by the way, and it also drops smaller pieces of marshmallow, usually one or two on the ground. Players can actually pick these up to heal themselves for quite a significant amount of health. So as you can see, this Marshmellow of Ruin is a really versatile spell, as you can increase its damage with your guns, and it also doubles as a semi-healing spell if you pick up the marshmallow bits. Honestly, really fun spell. I hope I can find one at a higher level very soon. And while recording B-roll for this Marshmellow spell, I found another legendary that I really like, the Cannonballer. For me, it dropped from Lechance, the skeleton pirate boss in the Warktooth Shallows, next to the Wreck of the Tempest Scorn fast travel point. This boss is a part of the main story, so you'll meet him eventually, but he dropped a really cool legendary rocket launcher that shoots cannonballs. Which makes me believe that this is his dedicated drop, as it fits the pirate team perfectly, even though Joyce was able to get the same Cannonballer weapon from Zombols. Either way, you'll definitely want to try this one out as soon as you find it, as it's a really strong launcher with the potential for some massive damage if you manage to land a crit. Now, because the weapon shoots cannonballs, which bounce a couple of times before exploding if you don't hit a target, you want to go for direct hits. This will instantly cause the projectile to explode, dealing massive damage to whatever it hits. And the reason you want to do that is because every hit counts with this weapon. You've got low ammo on account of it being a launcher, and emptying a clip means you have to wait for a slow reload animation too. For the same reason, I personally don't really like the secondary firing mode on this weapon, which you can of course swap to by pressing the corresponding button, which you can see over here on your HUD. Using this on the Cannonballer changes it from impact to multi-ball, which as you might have guessed shoots multiple projectiles at the same time. It seems to randomly shoot between 2 and 4 cannonballs, but a shot in this firing mode will always cost 3 ammo, regardless of how many projectiles you end up firing. And that is the main reason why I don't really like it, as you only get 2 shots before reloading, plus I found that I often missed many of the projectiles as well due to the random spread. However, in impact mode, the Cannonballer is a beast against high health targets like badasses and bosses, especially if you manage to hit their crit spots with the cannonball. I recommend keeping this one as a backup weapon that you can switch to when you need to deal with some tough customers. That's all. If you don't want to miss our next Wonderlands video, remember to subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this one, it would be awesome if you could leave a like. You can also check out our legendary farming video by clicking on the screen, or if that one's not up yet, you can check out our previous video on some early game legendaries we found. Goodbye!